for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson. We have a lot of updates today, including an update to a story we told you about several months ago about a man who allegedly shot a right-to-life volunteer accidentally. He has entered a plea. We will talk about that. Plus, we have an update to Ottawa Impact. Yes, another episode of As Ottawa County Turns will be coming up in this show. I have a very special Hammer Time segment, a very personal one. I saw something on social media and I about fell over when I saw this. Plus, we have some stories that we have missed for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to get up to date on those. Plus, we have to talk about the latest shooting in Louisville, Kentucky. So we'll get to that and much more on today's episode. But before we begin with today's topics, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. For the time being, you can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. We'll tell you why right after I finish doing all the intros. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. And once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. I specifically mentioned Twitter in our opening because Twitter has now given National Public Radio a state-sponsored media label. As a result, NPR is no longer on Twitter. They have now sued Twitter in federal court to get the state-sponsored media label removed. Many other NPR affiliates are also removing their presence from Twitter. And I think in solidarity, Pacifica Radio and every Pacifica affiliate, because we're also publicly funded, we need to get off of Twitter. We really do. Just hit Elon where it hurts, right in his wallet. As a matter of fact, Elon doubled down. He was asked for comment about NPR leaving Twitter, and he basically doubled down with a hashtag defund NPR. No, we need to defund you, Elon. Every single tax break you've ever gotten should be gone. Pay your fair share, you fascist. I wish somebody would just haul off and just smack the shit out of him. Really. I really wish somebody would. It needs to happen. All right, let's go to our stories for today. We have an update from a story that we told you about during the election cycle. This is John Tunison writing for the Grand Rapids Press and MLive. This was published April 10th out of Ionia, Michigan. A man who told police he accidentally shot an 83-year-old right-to-life volunteer has pleaded no contest to 3 charges. 75-year-old Richard Harvey pled no contest Monday, April 10th, to felonious assault, careless discharge of a weapon causing injury, and reckless use of a firearm. A sentencing date will be set at a later time. During an earlier hearing, testimony showed that Harvey told police he was trying to knock a clipboard out of the hands of Joan Jacobson when the gun went off. Jacobson was shot in the shoulder. Jacobson stopped at the Harvey residence on September 20th, 2022 to canvass against Proposal 3, the now passed initiative that has guaranteed the right to abortion in Michigan's state constitution. Harvey told police he was in a barn and heard arguing when he came out. He had a .22 caliber rifle and used it to knock the clipboard, later telling other media he thought Jacobson might strike his wife. Jacobson has claimed that she argued with the wife but was leaving when she was shot. Yeah. I don't believe her story for a minute. I know how aggressive these right-to-lifers are. Sorry, just telling you folks. She has since recovered from the injury. So we will see what happens. Actually, one of our longtime listeners, when I published this article, reached out and he said, maybe Harvey should have claimed castle doctrine. He used the phrase stand your ground, which in Michigan, stand your ground is actually called castle doctrine. The idea that a man's home is his castle, he does not need to retreat from any threat of any kind whatsoever. So in the state of Michigan, under castle doctrine, you are allowed to use deadly force if somebody comes into your house and threatens you. That's how it is. So, hey, maybe it would have worked. I don't know. I guess somebody should have talked to his attorney. All right, since we're talking about Michigan, we might as well go on to our next subject here and get the music. Oh, yeah. And now, Hochter and Ramble present As Ottawa County Turns. This portion brought to you by Hampers. If your baby soils itself, throw it in the hamper. You got it. Oh, boy. Yep. A new sponsor this week, Hampers. Oh, boy. Let's go ahead to this story. This is Charlie Tinker writing for WZZM-TV. This is dated April 11th out of Ottawa County. The Ottawa County Board of Commissioners voted to walk back a policy some had complained restricted the board from discussing important issues. Ottawa Impact, the right-leaning political action committee backing a majority of board members elected to serve in November, agreed with the decision. Others shared concerns regarding the board's motives and, in general, the level of transparency they've seen from their county government since January when the new slate of board members formally took office. The policy, which states, the board exercises limited power and that they can only entertain resolutions within their authority, was set by the previous board. Though the measure did come up in public comment, much of the discussion surrounding stripping the provision occurred during an earlier committee meeting. The measure, included in the Commission's consent agenda, passed as expected Tuesday, though not without opposition from members of the public in attendance. One speaker said, quote, "Today I stand before you again after more and more horrific mass shootings. I'm angry that you want to disregard common sense gun laws. In favor of what? What are you hoping to accomplish?" End of quote. That has to do with a resolution to make Ottawa County a Second Amendment sanctuary. So let me continue. A supporter of the motion, of whom there were several, linked the original policy to precautionary measures observed during the coronavirus emergency. One person commented, quote, "It looks like that by design to create plausible deniability. It was our hands are tied. The COVID hysteria is past. The money was grabbed and spent. It is time to end this policy. One of the first resolutions I would like the board to take up is the Second Amendment resolution." End of quote. The comment, which received some applause, referred to so-called Second Amendment sanctuaries, a status that instructs law enforcement not to enforce strict gun laws, which, by the way, they're illegal. They have no power whatsoever. The law is the law, period, end of story. The designation was listed during an earlier meeting as a potential topic of conversation once the policy in question had been erased. Commissioner Roger Bergman said that he was appalled by the motion's verbiage and referred to the rationale advanced by several of his colleagues as another untruth. Other transparency-related concerns came to light early in Tuesday's marathon session. A speaker who identified herself as a county employee noted, quote, I cannot adequately express the palpable sense of fear and low morale that many of us have felt since January. End of quote. The employee who addressed the board during the public comment period accused County Administrator John Gibbs of discriminating against her during a conversation at work when, in response to what she said were ordinary questions, she said Gibbs told her he could tell which side of the aisle she was on. She added, quote, "The lack of transparency and divisiveness is tearing us apart," end of quote. A second commenter had this to say about governance-related concerns tied to the board's high-profile fight to oust its health director. Quote, "You have been wrong from day one. You would have been wrong every time the court told you you were wrong, and you will be wrong until the day you die," end of quote. Another resident questioned the circumstances surrounding Gibbs's search for an assistant. During an earlier meeting, Gibbs explained he intended to delegate some of his duties to the candidate chosen. Several others who addressed the board during the public comment period praised commissioners for their work thus far, once again proving that there's a pack of idiots in every crowd. And I want to get to kind of a sidebar story here. This is Jillian Fellows and Mitchell Boatman writing for the Holland Sentinel. This was published through the USA Today network. County officials in multiple Michigan communities are testing the boundaries of their legal reach when it comes to limiting the powers of their local health departments. A resolution authored by Rich Ginnup, chairman of the Emmett County Board of Commissioners and submitted to the Health Department of Northwest Michigan Board of Health, would require all government emergency measures regarding a pandemic to expire after 28 days. Only a 3/4 vote of the full Board of Health would be able to authorize the continued implementation of such measures, and then only on a month-by-month basis. The resolution also states the health department shall not impose, permit, or enforce COVID-19 vaccine mandates, mandated masking, or testing of asymptomatic persons. In a previous interview, Ginnup said he was motivated to write the resolution because, quote, "I am sick and tired of the so-called authorities lying to us and not revealing the truth about vaccine damages, deaths, and injuries that are happening," end of quote. Because they're not happening, you idiot. Even before the resolution went to a full discussion and vote, its legality was in doubt. Officials from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services said the proposed 28-day expiration for health measures could not legally be applied to mandates from MDHHS or the federal government. Spokeswoman Chelsea Wolf said in response to Ginnup's resolution, quote, "Courts have consistently upheld MDHHS's ongoing authority under the Public Health Code. MDHHS will continue to use its powers to protect the lives of the people of Michigan," end of quote. The board's own advising attorney, Matthew Cross, said the resolution was, quote, "not consistent with the health code. Any limitations you're trying to put on the health officer are simply not consistent with the health code. Most of this resolution would be invalidated if it was subjected to a legal challenge," end of quote. 8 members comprise the Board of Health, 2 each from the Health Department's jurisdiction of Antrim, Charlevoix, Emmett, and Otsego counties. The measure failed in a tied vote at the board's April 4th meeting, which saw a strong turnout from members of the public. The meeting isn't the first time the Health Department of Northwest Michigan has drawn a standing room only crowd. A school mask mandate issued by then Health Officer Lisa Peacock in August 2021 led to months of heated discussion and attempts to remove Peacock from her position. Peacock eventually resigned, citing a hostile work environment. The controversy follows similar veins to an ongoing power struggle in Ottawa County, farther south. The legality of a health officer's authority to issue a school mask mandate was tested in a now-dismissed case during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, in Ottawa County, tensions are especially high. The sitting health officer, Adeline Hambly, filed a lawsuit against several members of the county's Board of Commissioners, later amended to include the board as a whole after they took action to constructively terminate her earlier this year. Hambly was hired by the former board in December, before 8 new members took office in January, many backed or associated with Ottawa Impact Political Action Committee, an upstart far-right political group born from clashes over the county's COVID-19 mitigation mandates in 2020. Its founders, Joe Moss and Sylvia Rodea, were unsuccessful in suing the previous Board of Commissioners and the county's former health officer, Lisa Stefanovsky. In response, they targeted seats on the board in 2022, recruiting like-minded candidates who agreed traditional Republicans weren't enforcing true conservative policies. During the first meeting of the new board, the 7 commissioners named in Hambly's lawsuit voted to demote her to interim health officer and replace her with an appointee who aligns with the new board's views on COVID-19. By the way, he's not qualified at all. Hambly's lawsuit claims the board is preventing her from doing her job. Since the lawsuit was filed, a temporary restraining order was granted to Hambly, which prevents the board from firing her while the case plays out in court. In late February, after Hambly filed her lawsuit, Ottawa Impact commissioners voted 6-5 in favor of changing the wording of the resolution that hired Hambly, in essence arguing she had never been properly hired at all. As a matter of fact, there's arguments that the changing of the wording that late is a violation of Michigan's Open Meetings Act. You cannot change the minutes of a meeting after they have been approved. Period. End of story. A hearing for the lawsuit took place in Muskegon County on March 31st after all judges in Ottawa County recused themselves from the case. Judge Jenny L. McNeil heard arguments and will issue a written opinion as soon as possible. A time frame was not given. So there you go, folks. That's what's happening right now in Ottawa County, Michigan, with all these right-wing nut jobs who have absolutely no business being where they are. It really is that simple. So, folks, let's go ahead and let's get out of this segment. Oh, yeah. Love this music. Join us again soon for another edition of As Ottawa County Turns. This program is produced for Big D Entertainment. Stay tuned for the edge of blight over most of these stations. Hey, we can't pay for production values. I mean, we're part of Pacifica, right? Oh, boy. What great stuff there, let me tell you. All right, let's go ahead to our next segment.
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. Now, usually I go after political figures or organizations that just do wrong things. Well, this one is more of a personal basis. I spotted this on social media, and I have confirmed that it is true. This week's winner of Douchebag of the Week is Gary Gardenhire, the owner of the Penwell Knights Raceway in Penwell, Texas. Why? Because he kicks people out that don't stand for the national anthem. I am not making this up. I have confirmed this on Facebook. This was posted to Facebook by John Carl Teague II, and he tagged several other people in this. And it's a picture, a man and a woman that supposedly sat during the national anthem. Here's what he wrote. Because this couple chose to sit during the prayer and the national anthem today here at Penwell Knights Raceway, the owner, Gary Gardenhire, refunded their gate fees and they were asked to leave the track. God bless you, Gary. No, f*** you, Gary. F*** you. You Christo-fascist son of a bitch. I tell you what, try and make me stand. Watch what happens. Because you won't be standing. You'll be laying on the ground. I guarantee it. First one to ever touch me doing that, they're going to find out what mental illness is all about, because I will go off on them in a blind rage. Unfucking believable that this is allowed in this country. I don't give a shit. I do not give a shit. Oh, it's private property. You know what? You've opened a place of public accommodation. If you don't like it, then you need to shut down the track or you need to sell it to somebody who's a little more tolerant of other people. This is why I hate Christianity and Christians, because of this behavior. So, Gary Gardenhire, congratulations on getting my dandruff up. We have this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
This guy is the king of douchebags in Texas. And I tell you what, Gary, if I'm entitled to my opinion, if you don't like what I have to say, that's tough for you. Because I tell you what, come do that in my face, like I said, and watch what happens. Absolutely unbelievable. Right now, folks, something else that really has me upset is yet another mass shooting, this time Louisville, Kentucky. A disgruntled bank employee who apparently has mental health issues, don't really know, bought a gun. Again, let me just add, was a law-abiding citizen up until the point that he bought his assault weapon and walked into Old National Bank in downtown Louisville and then started shooting people indiscriminately. 4 died at the scene. 1 person died of their injuries later in the hospital. There were 8 others injured, including a Louisville Metro police officer. I believe it was only his 4th shift, first week on the job or second week on the job, shot in the head. And all Mitch McConnell can do is offer thoughts and prayers. You know what I'd like to see Mitch McConnell offer besides his resignation? Some common sense gun legislation. Oh, we got to have Second Amendment sanctuaries for everybody. The Supreme Court has ruled over and over and over again that the government has an inherent interest in gun legislation. The Second Amendment is not absolute. Sorry, it isn't. If you believe that it is, then you need to think again, get an education, grow a brain, whatever you need to do to get to the point where we are, the rest of us, in a sane society. Really. What else can I say about this shooting that hasn't already been said? This is just becoming monotonous. I'm tired of talking about it. I want some action. I want some action from some congressmen, from some legislators. Speaking of legislators, we have an update to the story that we talked about on last week's show. They got me all fired up at the end. The Tennessee 3, which indeed turned out to be the Tennessee 2 because white Republicans in the Tennessee legislature aren't going to kick out a fellow white person. Sorry, I'm going to say it. That was racist. Extremely racist. So there you go. 1 week ago when we were recording on April 6th, the Tennessee State House had removed Representative Justin Jones from Nashville. They were getting ready to hear from Representative Gloria Johnson of Knoxville, who is also a Democrat. She survived by 1 vote. In the meantime, Representative Justin Pearson, who is a Democrat out of Memphis, he was also kicked out. Well, not for very long, because on Monday of this week, the Nashville City Council overwhelmingly voted to send Justin Jones back to the Tennessee State House as the interim before a special election is held to fill that seat. And Memphis did the same thing on Wednesday by sending Justin Pearson back to the Tennessee State House. Of course, now the racist in the Tennessee State House, the racist Republicans, are now threatening to cut funding for Nashville and Memphis. I tell you what, I'm beginning to think it's time for Joe Biden to send the National Guard into Tennessee and run things that way. Tell you what, the Republicans want to be fascist, you got to throw it right back in their face. You really do. Because that's the only language that they understand. All right, let's get to some stories that we've missed for the last couple of weeks. Jack Prince wanted me to talk about this one. This has to do with the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship and some of the fallout from the championship game. This is Haley Jordan writing for Sports Illustrated. This is dated April 3rd out of Dallas, Texas. The NCAA Women's Basketball Championship in Dallas, Texas was well attended, respected, and played as the women's sport has boomed with popularity in the past few seasons. More than 19,000 fans attended the title game where LSU beat Iowa 102-85, but the big game wasn't without controversy and trash talk. The matchup was highly anticipated as Iowa was coming off a Big Ten tournament win and a huge defeat over the undefeated and reigning NCAA title holder South Carolina in the Final Four. LSU only lost 2 games this season to South Carolina and then Tennessee in the SEC tournament. Then the Tigers knocked off number 1 seed Virginia Tech in the Big Dance to advance to the title game. Perhaps the players that drew in fans to American Airlines Center for the Final Four was junior Iowa Hawkeyes guard Caitlin Clark and LSU Tigers sophomore forward Angel Reese. Clark is known as the Big Ten and AP Player of the Year, while Reese also put up a tremendous performance this season, averaging 23 points and 15.4 rebounds per game, which is the second best in the country. However, these pair of talented players have big personalities and have either been criticized or celebrated for it all season long across social media. Clark has been seen taunting teams on the court when she swishes a deep three, and Reese is just as expressive on the floor. In the title game, Reese was caught on camera pointing at her ring finger in Clark's direction, who claimed she didn't know what was going on. In a post-game press conference, Clark said, quote, "Honestly, I have no idea. I was just trying to get to the handshake line and shake hands and be grateful that my team was in that position. That's all you can do is hold your head high, be proud of what you did." End of quote. Clark went on to say she received kind words from LSU head coach Kim Mulkey, who also sparked controversy of her own in the title game. The legendary coach, who's now won 4 national championships with both Baylor and now LSU, was seen walking all over the court while the clock was running to the point where an official lightly pushed her out of the way. Mulkey didn't address that in the post-game press conference, but Reese did talk about the criticism she herself gets on social media. Reese said, quote, "Twitter is going to go on a rage every time, and I'm happy. I feel like I've helped grow women's basketball this year. I'm super happy and excited, so I'm looking forward to celebrating in the next season. Twitter can say what Twitter can say. I love reading those comments. I have all the screenshots of what everybody has said about me all season. What are you going to say now?" End of quote. Mulkey didn't have much to add about the Twitter rage and appeared put out with questions related to the topic in her post-game press conference. Mulkey said, quote, "If you're on social media and hiding behind a computer, I don't like you. If you want to face me eyeball to eyeball and disagree with me on things, I respect you more. I know nothing about Twitter, Facebook. I have accounts. You'll see I have accounts. I don't touch those. My coaches do it for me, so I can't help you in any area of what was said." End of quote. Fans across social media, specifically Twitter, were criticizing Reese's unsportsmanlike attitude. However, Clark has been in the same boat in other major games this season. In Iowa's loss to Indiana on February 9th, Clark flew past the Hoosiers bench, putting up a 3 sign next to her eye. However, she wasn't gloating much during the title game. She actually gave credit to LSU's 11 three-pointers and said the Tigers deserved to win. Hawkeye coach Lisa Bluter was also quick to praise LSU. She said, quote, "I just want to congratulate LSU. I thought they played a phenomenal game. They shot the ball really, really well today. I'm so proud of my team. I'm proud of the women they are. I'm proud of what they stand for. The Iowa fans that came here in droves, I'm so thankful for them. I'm thankful that I get to coach at a university like the University of Iowa." End of quote. The trash talk is part of the game, whether fans or the teams themselves agree with it or not. However, the title game also brought light to what both announcers and fans called a game of poor officiating. Clark picked up her 3rd foul by the second quarter and her 4th by the 3rd, which was a controversial technical for tossing a ball behind her toward the hoop and not passing it to a referee. Clark said, quote, "I thought they called it very, very tight. I don't know about the 2 push-offs in the second quarter. I'm sure they saw that I pushed off and they called it and whatnot, and then hit with the technical foul in the third for throwing the ball under the basket," end of quote. Official Lisa Jones told a reporter why the technical was called on Clark. She said, quote, "Iowa received a delay of game warning in the third period at the 7:28 mark for batting the ball away after a made basket, causing a delay. The second offense was when number 22 from Iowa picked up the ball and failed to immediately pass the ball to the nearest official after the whistle was blown. Rule reference Rule 10, Section 12, Article 3K. The definition of the delay can be found in Rule 4, Section 9, Article 1F. By failing to, and it reads, attempting to gain an advantage by interfering with the ball after a goal, or by failing to immediately pass the ball to the nearest official after the whistle is blown," end of quote. Clark wasn't the only one stopped by a whistle. Fifth-year center Monica Sinano picked up early fouls and eventually fouled out in her last collegiate game ever, along with senior forward guard McKenna Warnock. Bluter said, quote, "I can't comment on the officials. It's very frustrating because I feel like I can't talk to them. They won't even listen. That's what's frustrating, is there wasn't even a conversation that could be had. When your 2 seniors have to sit on the bench, they don't know they're seniors. I get it. But those 2 women didn't deserve it. I don't think so. And then Caitlin getting a T? I don't know. It's too bad," end of quote. LSU was also getting the whistle blown on them too, as Reese had 2 fouls by the second quarter off a questionable call on her trying to steal the ball from Iowa's Hannah Stulke. Reese finished the game with 3 fouls while her team ended with 18 compared to Iowa's 19. Even with trash talking and poor officiating, the title game was one to remember as the Tigers won their first national championship and did so shooting an incredible 54.3% from the field and 64.7% from the three-point line. For the Hawkeyes, Clark scored a record of 191 points in the NCAA tournament, the most of any men's or women's player in history. Through tears of joy, Mulkey celebrated her talented Tigers as her LSU squad got the final say on an exceptional 2022 and 2023 women's basketball season. Mulkey said, quote, "They just blessed me. They're ballers. They get on each other. I don't know how we did it. Defense and rebounding carried us a lot this year. I can't tell you defense carried us today, but you're playing against a generational talent in Clark, so you knew you'd better score the ball with them, and we scored the ball from all positions today," end of quote. So this article really doesn't address the big issue. The big issue is that people on social media were super critical of Reese because of her trash talking. She did the John Cena hand gesture, "you can't see me," when Clark had done the same thing earlier in the season and didn't get anywhere near the pushback on it. So there has been a discussion that the only reason that Reese is getting criticized while Clark isn't is because Reese is black and Clark is white. I can't see any other reason. I really can't. If you can find a reason, then shoot me an email, southpawsradio@gmail.com, and I'll read it on the air. All right, let's go ahead to a couple of stories that we missed from 2 weeks ago when the Nashville shooting took place and we had to readjust the entire show. This is Bruce Schreiner writing for the Associated Press. This is dated March 29th out of Frankfort, Kentucky. Republican lawmakers in Kentucky on Wednesday swept aside the Democratic governor's veto of a bill regulating some of the most personal aspects of life for transgender young people, from banning access to gender-affirming health care to restricting the bathrooms they can use. The votes to override Governor Andy Beshear's veto were lopsided in both legislative chambers, where the GOP wields supermajorities, and came on the next to last day of this year's legislative session. The debate is likely to spill over into this year's gubernatorial campaign in Kentucky and could reach the court if opponents follow through on a threat to mount a legal challenge against the bill. Activists on both sides of the impassioned debate gathered at the State House to make competing appeals shortly before lawmakers took up the transgender bill. A few hours before the vote, as transgender rights advocates rallied outside Kentucky's capital, trans teenager Sun Pasiga held up a sign summing up a grim review of Republican legislation aimed at banning access to gender-affirming health care. The sign read, quote, "Our blood is on your hands," end of quote. Expressing a persistent concern among the bill's critics that the restrictions could lead to an increase in teen suicides, the 17-year-old student said, quote, "If it passes the restricted access to gender-affirming health care, I think trans kids will die because of that," end of quote. The Kentucky Senate voted 29-8 to override Beshear's veto, as chants from Bill's opponents echoed throughout the Capitol. A short time later, the Kentucky House completed the override on a vote of 76-23, but not before chanting opponents of the bill were escorted out of the chamber. Well, there you go, restricting First Amendment rights. Again, Republicans, do as I say, don't do as I do. Bill supporters assembled to defend the measure, saying it protects trans children from undertaking gender-affirming treatments they might regret as adults. However, research shows that such regret is rare. At a rally Wednesday, Republican Representative Shane Baker said, quote, "We cannot allow people to continue down the path of fantasy to where they're going to end up 10, 20, 30 years down the road and find themselves miserable from decisions that they made when they were young," end of quote. Once the rally in support of the bill ended in the Capitol Rotunda, opponents watching from the balconies chanted, "Shame, shame." The legislation in Kentucky is part of a national movement, with state lawmakers approving extensive measures that restrict the rights of LGBTQ+ people this year, from bills targeting trans athletes and drag performers to measures limiting gender-affirming care. At least 10 states have enacted laws restricting or banning gender-affirming care for minors. They are Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Georgia, Iowa, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Utah, and South Dakota. Or, as my former co-host Jim Gerner would say, the slave states. Because that's what they want to do. They want to make you into a slave. A proposed ban is pending before the Republican governor in West Virginia. Federal judges have blocked enforcement of laws in Alabama and Arkansas, and nearly 24 states are considering bills this year to restrict or ban care. The debate in the Kentucky Senate reflected the impassioned arguments put forth at the rival rallies. In opposing the bill, Democratic Senator Karen Berg said, quote, "We are denying families, their physicians, and their therapists the right to make medically informed decisions for their families," end of quote. Berg read what her son, Henry Berg Brousseau, wrote in advocating for transgender rights shortly before his death late last year at age 24. His mother said the cause was suicide. This is what's going to happen to these transgender folks, these kids. If you take away their care, if you take away their rights, they're going to kill themselves. You can guarantee it. Republican Senator Robbie Mills said he supported the bill because of his belief that, quote, "Puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones when administered to youth under 18 for the purpose of altering their appearance is dangerous for the health of that child," end of quote. Transgender medical treatments have long been available in the United States and are endorsed by major medical associations. Mills added that another reason for his support was that, quote, "Parents and students should have confidence that bathrooms in their school will only be used by the same biological sex," end of quote. I somehow have a suspicion that Senator Mills either grew up or lived in an area of Kentucky that probably still doesn't have running water and flushing toilets. Yes, they exist, folks. They really do. The sweeping Kentucky measure would ban gender-affirming care for minors. It would outlaw gender reassignment surgery for anyone under 18, as well as the use of puberty blockers and hormones, and inpatient and outpatient gender-affirming hospital services. Doctors would have to set a timeline to detransition children already taking puberty blockers or undergoing hormone therapy. They could continue offering care as they taper a youngster's treatments if removing them from the treatment immediately could harm the child. Well, of course it's going to harm the child. They're going to want to try and kill themselves. The bottom line is Republicans don't give a f*** about children. You can prove it. This proves it here. The lack of any common sense gun laws in this country to keep school shootings from happening, that is proof. They don't give a f*** about your children. They care about their own, and that's it. Unless they were to become part of the LGBTQ community, and then they'd probably kick them out of the house. By the way, if you don't believe me, go to Google and type in how many trans children are homeless in the United States. How many LGBTQ plus children are homeless in the U.S.? The bill would not allow schools to discuss sexual orientation or gender identity with students of any age. Once again, a violation of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law. It would also require school districts to devise bathroom policies that, at a minimum, would not allow transgender children to use the bathroom aligned with their gender identities. It would further allow teachers to refuse to refer to transgender students by the pronouns they use. And that's another way that you're going to make trans children kill themselves. It is a proven fact that when you don't use the correct pronouns for a transgender student, that causes mental illness, depression. They will kill themselves. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. Go to Google and type in the search bar, how many trans children have committed suicide because they were not called by their proper pronouns. Another trans teenager, Hazel Hardesty, said the potential discontinuation of gender-affirming health care would mean, quote, my male puberty would continue, end of quote, which would, quote, cause a lot of mental distress, end of quote. During the rally, the 16-year-old, again, this is a 16-year-old kid being ignored by idiot right-wing fascists, said, quote, people don't even understand how it feels. Going through the wrong puberty, every day your body is a little bit farther from what feels like you, and eventually you don't even recognize yourself in the mirror, end of quote. This legislation is going to cause students to die. Hope you're happy, Kentucky. Hope you're happy. Keep voting for these right-wing sons of bitches. You'll see what happens. I want to get to our next story here. This is a follow-up to a story that we reported on last year. This is Todd Richmond writing for the Associated Press. This is dated March 28th out of Madison, Wisconsin. After nearly a year of searching, investigators used DNA pulled from a half-eaten burrito to capture the man they believe firebombed a prominent Wisconsin anti-abortion lobbying group's office. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Madison announced that police arrested 29-year-old Rindu Sankar Roy Chowdhury at Boston's Logan International Airport on Tuesday. He was charged via the complaint with one count of attempting to cause damage by means of fire or an explosive. He made an initial appearance in federal court in Boston on Tuesday. Roy Chowdhury's attorney, Brendan O. Kelly, who is listed in online court records as a federal public defender, declined comment when reached by phone after Tuesday's hearing. Federal agents have been searching for almost a year for whoever tossed a pair of Molotov cocktails into the Wisconsin Family Action Office in Madison on May 6th. One of the firebombs failed to ignite. The other set a bookcase on fire. A message was spray-painted on the building's exterior which read, quote, if abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either, end of quote. No one was in the office at that time. The attack came about a week after a draft opinion suggesting the Supreme Court would overturn Roe v. Wade, the decision that legalized abortion, leaked. The release sparked abortion rights supporters to mount protests across the country. 2 Catholic churches in Colorado were vandalized in the days leading up to the Madison firebombing, and someone threw Molotov cocktails into an anti-abortion organization's office in a suburb of Salem, Oregon, several days later. The court officially overturned Roe v. Wade, putting June's 1849 ban on abortion back into play. According to the criminal complaint against Roy Chowdhury, investigators pulled DNA samples from 3 individuals from evidence at the scene of the Wisconsin attack. But the samples didn't match any profiles in the U.S. Department of Justice's DNA database. As time went on, Wisconsin Family Action President Julian Appling offered a $5,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. She accused Democratic Governor Tony Evers and Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes of being more interested in empathizing with abortion rights activists than bringing any suspects to justice. Well, Julian Appling is full of shit. This past January, police assigned to protecting the state capitol building in Madison reviewed surveillance video of a protest against police brutality. The footage showed several people spray painting graffiti on Capitol grounds. The graffiti resembled the graffiti at the Wisconsin Family Action office. So they got it basically from handwriting. The footage showed 2 people leaving the area in a white pickup truck, which investigators tracked to Roy Chowdhury's residence in Madison, according to the criminal complaint. Police then began following him. On March 1st, he pulled into a Madison park and ride and threw away a bag of fast food. After he left, police retrieved the bag from the trash can. DNA on a burrito in the bag matched DNA taken from the Wisconsin Family Action office, according to the criminal complaint. The U.S. Attorney's Office said in a statement that Roy Chowdhury traveled from Madison this month to Portland, Maine. He had a one-way ticket for a flight from Boston to Guatemala City, Guatemala, that was scheduled to depart Tuesday morning when he was arrested. The complaint said that investigators have been unable to match the other 2 DNA profiles from the scene to anyone. Appling had no comment Tuesday on Roy Chowdhury's arrest. William McCrary, the special agent in charge of the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives St. Paul Field Division, which handles crimes in Wisconsin, said, quote, "I'm very proud of the tireless and determined efforts the combined federal, state, and local team put in to identify and arrest this individual. It is very satisfying to me to see that this alleged perpetrator has been placed in custody." End of quote. Well, not to me it doesn't. I'm not saying you should go out and do this, but I'm just saying if you know anything, shut your mouth. Really? Sorry. I just don't care anymore. I'm tired of fascists trying to run everybody's lives. It's bullshit, and it needs to stop. Popper's paradox of tolerance. Just saying. Just saying. I actually want to read a meme that I posted to my Facebook page. I've always talked about Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance. That says that if you tolerate the intolerant take over, and you can't get control back. And it is up to a tolerant society to squash intolerance by any means necessary, including violence. That's not my words, that's Karl Popper's words. I believe Popper used the words morally ethical to use that kind of tactic. So I want to read this meme. It says, "The paradox of tolerance disappears if you look at tolerance not as a moral standard, but as a social contract. If someone does not abide by the terms of the contract, then they are not covered by it. In other words, the intolerant are not following the rules of the social contract of mutual tolerance. Since they have broken the terms of the contract, they are no longer covered by the contract, and their intolerance should not be tolerated." That is inspired by a piece entitled "Tolerance is Not a Moral Precept" by Jonathan Zunger. There's a reply to this meme. It says, "Sorry, as someone who teaches rhetoric, this is a wonderful response to the paradox of tolerance. I cannot tell you how many times my students have had debates about this. This is the response. This does indeed fix it. I cannot wait to tell this to my classes now. Philosophically and rhetorically, this completely resolved the paradox of tolerance, and I am floored by its simplicity and angry I never saw it before." Well, it's the truth. You know, truth hurts sometimes. Actually, all the time. And I have a couple of personal thoughts that I want to end today's show with. One of them has to do with somebody who used to be a supporter of this show. He happens to be a franchisee for a local big boy restaurant in the Grand Rapids area. I'm sure you can guess who it is. I'm not going to mention his name because it's not worth my time or my effort. I went by his business the other day and noticed that it was closed at a time where it would normally be open and be busy. And there's a sign on the door that says that they are open every day from 7 a.m. to 2:30 in the afternoon. They said, "We are currently hiring and hoping to be able to serve you again for dinner very soon." Now, this is a guy that argued with me about unions a while back. This guy identifies as progressive, but the statements that he was making to me were very anti-union. And you can't be a progressive if you don't support unions. Sorry, that's how it works. It's a litmus test. Don't support unions, you're not a progressive. Don't believe in a $15 an hour minimum wage, you're not a progressive. Don't believe in single-payer universal health care, you are not a progressive. Sorry, check, check, check. So it makes me wonder how much he's paying his employees. If anybody would like to find out for me, I would love to know. Speaking of unions, I want to read this. This is something I haven't read in a long time on this show, and this is something I really wanted last week in my conversation with Jack about the definition of a scab. I'm going to read what Jack London wrote many, many years ago. It's titled The Scab. After God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful stuff left with which he made a scab. A scab is a two-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a waterlogged brain, and a combination backbone made of jelly and glue. Where others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. Judas Iscariot was a gentleman compared to a scab. For betraying his master, he had the character to hang himself. The scab hasn't. There is nothing lower than a scab. Well, he's right about that. I tell you what. And speaking of unions, Bernie Sanders went after the former CEO of Starbucks Coffee. This is the guy that was just on the Food That Built America. The guy that turned Starbucks from a shop that sold coffee beans into an actual barista where you could buy brewed coffee. And Bernie just lit him up. It was beautiful to see. If you get a chance to view it on YouTube or on the news or anything like that, I really highly recommend it. Now, Bernie, it's time to go back after the banking industry. Why? Because earlier this week I tried to pay my mother's credit card with cash. The problem was my mom wasn't with me, and her credit card is through Chase Bank. Chase Bank does not accept cash for non-deposit holders. If you're trying to deposit money into somebody else's account, you need to write a check. If you try to pay a credit card, you have to write a check unless you are on the account. Then you can pay cash and deposit cash into accounts. And Chase is not the only one that does this. Bank of America does this, and Wells Fargo does this. They are the only 3 banks nationally that have this policy. None of the other big banks do this. Citigroup doesn't do this. Fifth Third doesn't do this. Huntington doesn't do this. You name them, they don't do it. It's really that simple. And one of our longtime supporters of the show responded, Doug Swisher. And hi, Doug, if you're out there. He said that he suspected that the rationale is to prevent drug money laundering, which is the excuse that Chase has given in the past. But I'm sorry, paying $7 on a credit card bill in cash is not money laundering. Besides, I worked in the banking industry at one time. As a matter of fact, I used to work for what is now Chase back in the days when it was NBD, National Bank of Detroit, before it got bought out 3 different times. And I was an assistant branch manager, so I know how it works. There's already laws to follow regarding cash transactions of over $10,000 or structured transactions. There's ways to do it, folks. It has to be done. The problem is that Chase either hasn't been doing it because their employees are lazy, or management has been lazy in training the employees how to file the proper paperwork with the federal government when there's a structured transaction or an all-cash transaction of over $10,000. My solution is simple. If the employees are too stupid or lazy to follow the rules, fire them! If the branch manager won't train the employees on these types of transactions, fire them! If the problem is with the way that the bank is structured, close it up! Break it up! It's time, Bernie! Time to break up these big banks. I'm sick of it. Everybody's sick of it. To the exorbitant fees, to the poor customer service, to the closure of branches, to ATMs not working, to not being able to talk to a live person. People are sick and tired of large banks, and they need to be broken up now. That's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.